What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walks into what should be a friendly late-night interview, only to find himself facing a host with a hidden agenda? Tonight, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation that had Johnny Depp stormed off the Jimmy Kimmel live set, leaving studio executives scrambling and audiences worldwide talking. This isn't just another celebrity feud. This is the moment when late-night television crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Before we get into the shocking details of what really went down behind those studio doors, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us what you think about celebrities standing up for themselves when interviewers go too far. The stage was set for what everyone expected to be another typical Jimmy Kimmel live appearance. Johnny Depp had agreed to come on the show to promote his latest independent film project, something he'd been passionate about for years. The audience was buzzing with excitement, phones were recording, and social media was already lighting up with anticipation of seeing the charismatic actor share stories and laughs with the late-night host. What nobody could have predicted was that Jimmy Kimmel had other plans entirely. From the moment Depp walked onto that stage, something felt different. The usual warmth and hospitality that guests typically experience was nowhere to be found. Instead of the customary friendly greeting and easy banter that Kimmel was known for, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Depp, ever the professional, maintained his composure and took his seat, flashing that signature smile to the audience who erupted in applause. But those who knew him well could see something in his eyes, a wariness that suggested he sensed what was coming. Kimmel started the interview conventionally enough, asking about the new film and Depp's creative process. The actor answered thoughtfully, sharing insights about his craft and the passion project that had brought him to the show. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal, almost routine. The audience was engaged, laughing at Depp's natural charm and storytelling ability. But seasoned television watchers could feel the undercurrent. The way Kimmel's questions seemed to have a sharper edge than usual. The way his follow-ups felt more like interrogation than conversation. Then came the first real jab. Under the guise of asking about Depp's career longevity, Kimmel made a comment about how some actors manage to stay relevant despite personal controversies. The words hung in the air like smoke, and you could practically feel the temperature in the studio drop several degrees. Depp's smile faltered for just a moment, a micro-expression that camera operators zoomed in on instinctively. He recovered, quickly deflecting with humor, but everyone present knew that Kimmel had just fired the first shot in what was about to become a very public battle. The audience, initially unaware of the subtext, continued to laugh and applaud, but the energy was shifting. Backstage, producers were exchanging worried glances, wondering if they should intervene or let the interview play out. Depp, meanwhile, was calculating his next move, his decades of experience in front of cameras serving him well as he maintained his composure while internally preparing for whatever Kimmel had planned next. The veteran actor had faced hostile interviews before, but this felt different, more personal, more calculated. What made this situation particularly volatile was the context surrounding it. Depp had been through years of legal battles and media scrutiny, emerging with his reputation largely intact and his career experiencing a renaissance. He'd come on the show in good faith, expecting the kind of respectful treatment that A-list celebrities typically receive on late-night television. Instead, he was walking into what felt increasingly like an ambush, orchestrated by a host who seemed determined to relitigate issues that the courts and public opinion had already settled. Kimmel, emboldened by what he perceived as a successful opening gambit, decided to push further. His next question wasn't really a question at all, but rather a thinly veiled accusation disguised as curiosity about how Depp dealt with negative publicity. The host leaned back in his chair with that characteristic smirk, clearly pleased with himself for what he thought was clever interviewing. But what he failed to recognize was that he was prodding a man who had already been through hell and had no intention of being anyone's punching bag, especially not for the entertainment of a late-night audience. Depp's response was measured but firm. He acknowledged that everyone in the public eye faces challenges, but he wasn't going to sit there and be lectured by someone who made a living making jokes about other people's lives. The actor's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. His words, a warning that Kimmel either didn't pick up on or chose to ignore. The audience was beginning to sense that this wasn't typical late-night banter anymore. This was becoming something much more serious and uncomfortable. Rather than backing down or steering the conversation back to safer territory, Kimmel doubled down. He made another comment, this one even more pointed, suggesting that some people in Hollywood never truly face consequences for their actions. The implication was crystal clear, and this time Depp didn't bother hiding his reaction. His jaw tightened, his posture shifted, and when he spoke, there was no mistaking the edge in his voice. He asked Kimmel directly what exactly he was trying to accomplish with these questions, whether this was supposed to be an interview or a trial. The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't the kind of playful celebrity roasting that late-night shows were known for. This was a deliberate attempt to humiliate a guest on national television. Camera operators continued rolling, knowing they were capturing television history, while producers in the control room debated whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation play out for the ratings gold it was becoming. Kimmel, perhaps realizing he'd pushed too far but unwilling to back down in front of his audience, attempted to frame his questions as journalism, claiming he was just asking the tough questions that his viewers wanted answered. This was the moment that Depp's famous composure finally cracked, not into anger or shouting, but into something far more devastating, cold clarity. He looked directly at Kimmel and said that if he wanted to play journalist, he should probably learn how to do research first, because everything he was implying had already been thoroughly investigated and resolved. The verbal sparring continued, with each exchange becoming more heated and personal. Kimmel tried to maintain his casual, joking demeanor, but it was becoming increasingly obvious that he was in over his head. Depp, meanwhile, was demonstrating exactly why he'd been one of Hollywood's most respected actors for decades. His command of language and timing, turning each response into a masterclass in how to dismantle an opponent without losing your dignity. The audience was riveted. Phones were recording everything, and social media was exploding with real-time reactions to the unprecedented confrontation. What made the situation even more tense was the power dynamic at play. Kimmel was on his home turf, surrounded by his staff and his audience, with complete control over the show's format and flow. But Depp had something more powerful, the moral high ground and the sympathy of viewers who were watching a guest being mistreated by a host who seemed more interested in scoring cheap points than conducting a respectful interview. The actors' responses were becoming sharper and more pointed, each one peeling back another layer of Kimmel's attempted gotcha journalism to reveal the petty motivation underneath. The breaking point came when Kimmel, apparently frustrated that his ambush wasn't going according to plan, made a comment that crossed every line of professional courtesy and human decency. He suggested that Depp's recent career resurgence was somehow undeserved, that there were people more worthy of the opportunities he was getting. The words landed like a physical blow, and for a moment, the entire studio held its breath. Depp sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable, but everyone present could feel the shift in the atmosphere, like the calm before a devastating storm. When Depp finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the studio. He said that he'd come on the show as a courtesy, to talk about his work and connect with fans, not to be lectured by someone whose biggest accomplishment was making fun of people braver than himself. The insult was surgical in its precision, delivered with the kind of controlled fury that only comes from years of dealing with people who mistake cruelty for comedy. Kimmel's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to anger to something resembling panic, as he realized he'd finally pushed the wrong person too far. The host tried to laugh it off, to turn it into a joke, but the damage was done. Depp stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled, every inch the consummate professional even in his anger. He thanked the audience for their time, apologized that they'd been subjected to what he called a pathetic display of attempted character assassination, and then delivered the line that would be replayed millions of times across social media. He told Kimmel that real journalists ask questions to get answers, not to feed their own egos, and that maybe he should consider a career change if he couldn't tell the difference. The audience erupted, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of the nervous laughter that typically follows uncomfortable moments on talk shows, there was genuine applause, people standing and cheering for Depp as he prepared to leave. Some audience members were actually booing Kimmel, a sound rarely heard on late-night television and never directed at the host of the show. The reversal was complete. The hunter had become the hunted, and Kimmel found himself facing the very public embarrassment he'd tried to inflict on his guest. Security didn't escort Depp out because he was causing trouble. They surrounded him to protect him from the chaos that was erupting in the studio. Audience members were shouting questions, phones were everywhere, and the controlled environment that television shows depend on had completely broken down. Depp handled it all with remarkable grace, shaking hands with audience members who approached him, signing autographs even as he was walking toward the exit, turning what should have been a humiliating retreat into something resembling a victory lap. Kimmel, meanwhile, was left standing on his own stage, facing an audience that had clearly chosen sides and hadn't chosen him. His attempts to regain control of the situation fell flat. His jokes landed like lead balloons, and for perhaps the first time in his career, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words. The show's producers were frantically signaling for a commercial break, but the damage was already done. The confrontation had been broadcast live, recorded by hundreds of phones, and was already spreading across every social media platform imaginable. As Depp reached the studio exit, he turned back one final time, not to Kimmel, but to the audience, and said something that would become the defining moment of the entire incident. He thanked them for reminding him why he loved performing, why connecting with real people was worth more than any amount of money or fame, and why respect had to be earned, not demanded. Then he was gone, leaving behind a studio in chaos, a host whose reputation would never fully recover, and a television moment that would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. The aftermath in the studio was surreal. Kimmel attempted to continue the show, but his heart clearly wasn't in it, and neither was his audience's. The remaining segments felt forced and awkward, with even his regular comedy bits falling flat in the wake of what everyone had just witnessed. It was a masterclass in how quickly the tables can turn in live television, how a host's arrogance can backfire spectacularly, and how audiences will always root for someone standing up to a bully, even when that bully has their own television show. What started as what Kimmel thought would be an easy target turned into a defining moment that showed the world exactly what kind of person Johnny Depp really was under pressure, and what kind of host Jimmy Kimmel could become when he thought he had all the power. The contrast couldn't have been more stark, and the public's reaction left no doubt about who had won this very public confrontation. That's the real story of what happened when Johnny Depp walked off Jimmy Kimmel Live. Not because he couldn't handle tough questions, but because he refused to be disrespected by someone who confused being mean with being funny. What did you think of how Depp handled this situation? Should celebrities have to put up with hostile treatment just because they're promoting their work? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories behind the headlines that everyone's talking about.